You're not too emotional. You're inconvenient. And inconvenient women get labeled unstable. Watch the pattern. You bring up something small, a tone, a look, a broken promise. You don't scream, you don't attack, you just say, "That hurt." And suddenly, you're overthinking. You're too sensitive. Why do you always make everything a problem? Pause right there. Did you notice what just happened? You came with pain. You left defending your personality. That's not miscommunication. That's emotional redirection. You start calm. 5 minutes later, you're explaining. 10 minutes later, you're proving you're not crazy. 30 minutes later, you're apologizing for your tone. And the original issue? Gone. Now the focus is you, your reaction, your delivery, your energy. He doesn't solve the problem. He analyzes you. Because if the problem is real, he would have to change. And change requires effort, consistency, accountability. It's easier to shrink you than to grow himself. So slowly, you adapt. You choose softer words. You remove certain topics. You rehearse conversations in your head. You adjust your facial expressions. You monitor your voice. You try to become easier to love. And it works. Fewer arguments, fewer tense nights, fewer emotional explosions. On the outside, the relationship looks healthier. Inside, you feel smaller. Because peace achieved by self-erasure is not peace. It's silence. And silence feels calm until you realize you're disappearing inside it. Here's the part that should wake you up. If you were truly too much, why are you stable everywhere else? Why are you composed at work, supportive with friends, grounded with family? Why does this dramatic version of you only exist in one relationship? Because it's not about your emotions. It's about a dynamic where your needs are treated as inconveniences. When you ask for reassurance, he calls it dependency. When you ask for clarity, he calls it interrogation. When you ask for consistency, he calls it control. Every request becomes a character flaw, and after enough repetition, you start questioning yourself. Maybe I do expect too much. Maybe normal women don't need this. Maybe I should just relax. That doubt, that's the goal. Because a woman who doubts herself is easier to manage than a woman who trusts her perception. And here's the brutal truth. He understands you. He just doesn't prioritize adjusting. It's not confusion, it's comfort. He's comfortable with you doing the emotional labor. He's comfortable with you softening first. He's comfortable with you fixing the tension. You call it patience. He calls it convenient. And one day you wake up and you feel alone next to someone who texts you every day. Not because he left, but because you left yourself. You stopped bringing things up. You stopped expecting follow-through. You stopped asking for depth. You became low maintenance. But low maintenance usually means high suppression. So here's the real question. If tomorrow you stopped shrinking, stopped over-explaining, stopped apologizing for your feelings, would he step up? Or would he say you've changed? Because that answer will tell you everything. Not about him, about what this relationship actually requires from you. And if what it requires is your silence, your softness, your constant adjustment, that's not love. That's accommodation. And accommodation without reciprocity is emotional loneliness. And the most dangerous part, you start shrinking before he even asks you to. You censor your words, you soften your boundaries, you prepare explanations in advance so he doesn't feel attacked. You carry the emotional weight of both of you. You manage the tension, you regulate the conflict, you adjust your tone. And he calls that peace. But it's not peace. It's you doing emotional labor so he doesn't have to grow. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop asking for clarity. You stop asking for consistency. You stop asking for more. Because every time you did, you were made to feel like the problem. And now you're tired, not of loving, of compensating, not of caring, of carrying. And somewhere inside, you already know, if you stopped compensating tomorrow, the relationship wouldn't collapse. It would simply reveal what was never being built equally. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. You are not exhausted because you love too much. You are exhausted because you love someone who gives less and expects you to call it enough. He doesn't scream. He doesn't cheat. He doesn't disappear. He just underdelivers every single time. And when you react, when you finally say, "This hurts," he tilts the frame. You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. You always create problems. And suddenly the conversation is no longer about his absence. It's about your reaction. That's the shift. That's the manipulation. Not dramatic, not loud, just consistent enough to make you doubt your own reality. And here's the brutal truth. You stay not because he's amazing. You stay because you remember the version of him that showed up in the beginning, the attentive one, the present one, the one who made you feel chosen. You're not fighting for the man he is. You're fighting for the man he was. But relationships are built on patterns, not potential. And the pattern is clear. You invest, he responds just enough to keep you hopeful. You raise concerns, he reframes them. You try harder, he relaxes. You shrink, he stays comfortable. And one day you wake up and realize something terrifying. You've been negotiating for crumbs in a relationship that once promised a feast. That's not love. That's imbalance. An imbalance always drains the one who gives more. So here's the question you've been avoiding. If you stopped giving more tomorrow, would he rise to meet you, or would everything fall apart? Because if it falls apart when you stop overcompensating, then you were never building together. You were holding it up alone. And maybe the real reason you're tired isn't because you're too emotional. Maybe it's because deep down, you know you deserve reciprocity, not effort when threatened, not affection when confronted, not attention when you pull away, but consistency without you having to beg for it. And the moment you truly accept that, everything changes.